Bet 45. Cool. You don't win.
Welcome back, guys. In the first hand for the vlog, there is an under the gun limp, then a £10 raise from our pal SB, who's also a pro. Then just before the action reaches us, small blind decides to 3-bet to £36. Pretty sure small blind is just a straightforward player who doesn't get out of line too much. I think this spot's over for about 30 seconds and come to the conclusion we shouldn't be calling here with SB yet to act behind us. So the question I think we got to ask here is whether we really want to be 3-betting or even going all in for that matter, as we only have £300 behind, and as we learned from the last vlog, we shouldn't be 3-betting more than a third of our stack. So ultimately, I think with ace king, yes, we can jam, but with our ace queen here, its props just a bit too loose, and I let it go.
Let it go, let it go.
Just 2 hands later, we pick up a premium king queen of clubs. The straddle is on, SB raises to £15, and the cutoff on our direct right now 3-bets to 50, and action is on us on the button. We only have £297 behind, so a 4-bet here would mean jamming. Do we think king queen of clubs is good enough to jam in this spot with one player yet to act? I think not, so unfortunately I do let this one go as well.
Let it go, let it go.
Stop it. Get some help.
Moving along, we pick up ace-8 of clubs. In the cutoff, I raise to 7, only the button calls. We go 2 ways to 9, 8, 8 to hearts. So we smash this board pretty hard. We are out of position though, and I decide to check and button bets 12 into 17. I think this board is incredibly wet and we have to raise. I raise to 40, but he unfortunately folds and we move.
Later.
After running absolutely dead for a whole hour and a bit, we've dwindled down to £240 from a £300 starting stack when arriving at this next hand. We've got ace-4 of clubs. I open it out of the hijack to £6 and we get 3 callers, the button and the blinds. So we go 4 ways to the flop, which comes 5, 7, 2, rainbow. We don't have much else other than a gut shot and a backdoor, so I check it here multi-way when it checks to me, and the button decides to check back. And now a gift from the poker gods when the turn is the 3 of hearts, and it's even better when the small blind bets 15, big blind calls, and of course we have to raise. I raise it to 65, and surprisingly the only caller is the button. So heads up to the river we go, which is the 8 of hearts. Not the best suit. I think this one over, and in the moment I see that I have around a pot size bet behind. Maybe I can get value from 2 pairs and sets, and I send all my chips into the middle. After about 3 whole seconds, he calls and shows king 10 of hearts. Looking back at this hand, I think the key point to note is the fact that button checked back the flop in position multi-way, which probably means villain is less likely to hold worse hands that we can get a large amount of value from, such as sets and 2 pairs, and his range is probably more weighted towards flushes. So with that, I probably should have sized down with a nut change in river. It is currently 11:40. I'm gonna have a few patties from Five Guys and then we'll be back in business shortly. We eventually return to the tables after our dinner break. The super straddle is on and we are on the button with the second best hand in the game. I raise it to 30. The straddler calls and the super straddler calls. And we go 3 ways to the flop, which comes 4, jack, queen, 2 hearts. Action checks to me. This is a very wet flop. I just bet 3rd pot since we are multi-way. The original straddler calls, super straddler folds. folds, and the turn is the 5 of hearts. He checks to us, and with the king of hearts, I think I definitely have to bet. I bet half pot, and he calls again. Still feel pretty good about my hand, and that we are ahead. The river is the 7 of clubs. He checks to us for a third time, and now I bottle it and check back. We show and are good. What I'll say about this hand is I probably should be putting the rest of my chips in the middle on the river with only just over a half pot bet behind, for the simple reason that the river was a blank, and if I felt I was ahead on the turn, I would therefore be ahead on a blank river. But with the recent scars of the ace forehand, I think monsters under the bed got me in this one, and we move. Up next, we pick up the jiggities. First to act, I raise to 10, hijack calls, and now the big blind decides to squeeze to a large £75. With the hijack left to act, I think the best thing to do here is probably jam or fold, but I instead call and hijack folds, so we go 2 ways to 7, 9, 3. Rainbow, a pretty good flop, but it does get a little tricky when just 15 seconds after the flop's been dealt, big blind goes all in for a pot size bet of £162. I think this over forever. So long, in fact, he tells me it's not chess we're playing. I think it over. Before I show you what I do, what would you do?
Let's party.
I decide to make the call. The turn is the 4 of clubs. The river is a disgusting king of hearts. But I show and we're good. And we win a big one. Moving along, we pick up ace king with a healthy £640 stack. Now back in the green for the first time in the session. I raise it to 10 out of +1. Low jack calls, hijack makes a squeeze to 35. I make the call and low jack makes the call. So we go 3 ways to a wonderful flop of double 5 ace. 2 hearts. Our position, I decide to check, and it checks through. Now the turn is another ace. I check. Low jack, who is a loose player, bets 45. Hijack calls. I call, and it's pretty clear there is someone amongst us without an ace going into the river. So with that being said, it's pretty much kicker roulette on this river, which unfortunately is not a king, but the 9 of clubs. I decide to block bet now for £75 because the truth is I could not tell you why.
There's no strategy. I have no strategy. There's zero strategy.
Low jack folds, and the hijack now puts us in the blender by putting all of his chips into the middle. I didn't even bother thinking about it. I snap called. He turns over ace 9, and I want to pull a gun out and shoot myself. Just joking. Guys, he shows ace 10, and luckily we split the pot. As time passed, the dynamic of the table started to change drastically. First, the straddle started to come on consistently, but eventually the super straddle and even the super duper straddle.
Triple stamped it, no erases, touch blue, make it true.
You can't triple stamp a double stamp. You can't triple stamp a double stamp, Lloyd.
So we essentially went from playing 1-2 to 2-5, 2-5, 10, and even then to 10-20. Since I'm not going to be topping up my stack to get back to 100 big blinds, I will now be playing with what is just over 30 big blinds, sitting with a whopping £700 when the super duper is on. But for this hand, it is just a super straddle. We get dealt in king 9 of spades. First to act, I raise to 30 out of the cutoff. The small blind calls, and the original straddler squeezes all in for his remaining £85. This spot very much feels like uncharted territory. If we just call, then we allow the small blind into the pot. Jamming just feels ridiculous, but maybe the right choice. And folding feels too weak. It almost feels like whatever I do, there is no clear good decision. I ended up just calling. You let me know in the comments what you think is the best choice here. Flop is 5-7-7 rainbow. No luck there. So when small blind leads out for 50, we have to fold. We move on to the next hand, which is another interesting one. On the button, first to act with the super duper on, we pick up king queen off with a stack that's just 31 big blinds deep. I choose a sizing of £60, which is probably ever so slightly too small with all the dead money out there. It probably makes sense to bet a bit bigger than the standard 3x open. As a result, we end up going 4 ways to 3-2-10 to diamonds. So no luck for us, and when UCG leads out £150, I am unfortunately out of there. We then arrive at this next hand with the big slick. With a £518 stack, the super straddle is on, and we are next to act in the hijack. I raised to 50, which is a better sizing than the previous hand with all the dead money out there, and it folds to the small blind, who is a competent young player who's at the casino quite often, and he decides to 3-bet to £165. I feel uncomfortable with the blinds on, and I should be jamming here. With the knowledge I have today, I think I need to jam here. But I do what I always do. I just call. And the flop comes 3-10-3, 2 diamonds, and now when small blind leads out for 125, I'm not happy to pay that price to see a turn, and I fold. So I think the main lesson to take from that hand is to ask yourself if you're comfortable risking a large stack more often when the blinds increase like that. As for me, I was not willing to risk all my chips for the sake of making the most optimal play, and that cost me, and I should have just changed tables, but at least it highlighted the fact I'm still playing somewhat scared money as well, and now time to try work on removing that from my game. Anyway, after that hand, I decided to pack up. With the last hand, I think jamming pre-flop, so I get to see all 5 cards, and you know, the straddle gave me the illusion that it was a 4-bet pot for some reason. I know it's silly, but what else was there? The red kings, I should be jamming on the river. Thank you all for watching. Peace.